The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a tumultuous epoch that ravaged the Italian peninsula from 568 to 751 CC. Within this turbulent landscape, one pivotal aspect stood out: the Lombards' relentless assault on the Byzantine stronghold of Ravenna. As the sun rose over the Apennine Mountains, the air was thick with tension. The year was 572 CE, and the Lombard king Alboin had set his sights on the ancient city of Ravenna, once a thriving capital of the Western Roman Empire. For centuries, this Byzantine stronghold had stood as a beacon of imperial power, its golden domes glinting like a promise of eternity. Alboin's armies, battle-hardened and driven by a hunger for conquest, marched relentlessly towards Ravenna's gates. The city's defenders, a mix of veteran soldiers and hastily assembled militia, prepared to face the onslaught. Behind the walls, Emperor Justinian II, ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire, watched with growing concern as his distant province teetered on the brink of collapse. As the Lombards approached, the city's defenders knew that their best hope lay in the mighty walls that had protected Ravenna for centuries. The ancient masonry, crafted by the skilled hands of Roman engineers, rose like a giant's fist to confront the invaders. But Alboin was no ordinary warlord. His tactics were as cunning as they were brutal. Under cover of night, Lombard scouts slipped past the city gates, seeking out vulnerable points in the defenses. With dawn breaking, the Lombards launched a series of lightning-fast attacks on key strong points. The defenders, caught off guard, struggled to respond effectively against the relentless pressure. Meanwhile, Alboin himself led a vanguard of elite warriors, their armor glinting like polished steel as they charged forward with a battle cry that echoed through the streets of Ravenna. For the king, for Italy. The Lombards surged forward, their pikes and swords flashing in the morning light as they fought their way into the city's heart. As the day wore on, the defenders' lines began to waver. With each passing hour, the Lombard army pushed deeper into Ravenna, claiming street by street, building by building. The once magnificent city was now a scene of chaos and destruction, its very fabric torn asunder by the relentless onslaught. In the midst of this turmoil, Emperor Justinian II watched in anguish as his loyal subjects fought to stem the tide of Lombard aggression. He knew that Ravenna's fall would be a devastating blow to Byzantine prestige and authority. The consequences for his own power and legitimacy were dire indeed. Yet even as the Lombards claimed victory after victory, there was one final desperate stand left to make. The city's defenders, battered but unbroken, rallied behind their commander, the brave and valiant general Sabinianus. Together, they launched a last-ditch effort to retake the city and drive the Lombards back. The outcome of this fateful battle would decide the fate not just of Ravenna, but of the entire Byzantine Empire. The very future of Italy itself hung precariously in the balance as the armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a period of tumultuous conflict that ravaged the Italian peninsula from 568 to 751 CC. It was an era of unrelenting strife, marked by brutal battles, treacherous alliances, and the rise and fall of mighty empires. As the curtain opened on this epic drama, the Byzantine Empire, once the jewel of the Mediterranean, found itself beset on all sides by a resurgent power. The Lombards, these fierce warriors hailing from the north, had long been a thorn in the side of the Imperium Romanum. Their leader, Alboin, a cunning and ruthless chieftain, gazed upon the Byzantine territories with covetous eyes. In 568 CE, Alboin launched a devastating invasion of Italy, his Lombard horde sweeping across the peninsula like a merciless tide. The Byzantines, weakened by years of civil war and external pressures, were powerless to stop the onslaught. Cities fell one by one, their defenders cut down or forced to flee in disarray. As the Lombards claimed victory after victory, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian II watched his once mighty realm shrink to a mere fraction of its former glory. The Italian mainland was now divided between the two warring powers. The Lombards held sway over most of Italy, while the Byzantines clung to their strongholds along the Adriatic coast. One of these Byzantine outposts was Ravenna, the ancient capital of the Western Roman Empire, and a city steeped in history. Here, the Byzantine Exarchate had established its seat, and it was from this fortress that the emperor's loyalist forces launched a series of desperate counterattacks against their Lombard foes. But the tide of war would not be stemmed so easily. The Lombards, with their characteristic ferocity, struck back at Ravenna itself, laying siege to the city in 552 CE. The Byzantine defenders, led by the valiant exarch Romanus, fought bravely, but ultimately succumbed to the relentless pressure. Ravenna fell, and with it the last remnants of Byzantine control over Italy disappeared. The Lombards, now masters of their new domain, set about consolidating their grip on the peninsula. They destroyed or desecrated ancient landmarks, such as the mausoleum of Galla Placidia, a testament to the once mighty Roman Empire. As the dust settled on this conflict-ravaged land, the Lombards and Byzantines entered into a fragile peace, with the latter clinging to their remaining strongholds. The stage was set for a century of intermittent warfare, marked by brutal raids, daring ambushes, and the rise of powerful warlords on both sides. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars would leave an indelible mark on the Italian peninsula, shaping the course of history for generations to come. It was an era that would see the birth of new dynasties, the fall of ancient powers, and the forging of a new identity for the people of Italy. In the sweltering summer of 568 CE, a chain reaction of events was set in motion that would shake the very foundations of Europe. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars had begun, pitting the mighty Eastern Roman Empire against the upstart kingdom of the Lombards in Italy. As the sun dipped into the rolling hills of the Italian countryside, the once mighty city of Pavia, capital of the Lombards, stirred with a sense of unease. King Alboin, a ruthless and cunning leader, had been consolidating his power for years, uniting the various Lombard tribes under one banner. But the Byzantine Empire, still reeling from the devastating effects of the plague, sensed weakness in its former vassal states. Emperor Justinian II, a calculating and ambitious ruler, saw an opportunity to expand Byzantine influence in Italy and reclaim lost territories. He dispatched a powerful army led by the experienced general John Mysticon to confront the Lombards and assert Byzantine dominance. As the Byzantine forces marched into Italian territory, they were met with fierce resistance from the Lombards. Alboin, ever the strategist, had prepared his armies well, employing clever tactics and leveraging the natural defenses of the Apennine Mountains. The two forces clashed in a series of brutal battles, with the Byzantines struggling to make headway against the determined Lombard warriors. One such battle took place on the dusty plains of Casalodunum, modern-day Castelrosso, where the Byzantine general, John Mysticon, found himself outmaneuvered by Alboin's cunning. The Lombards employed a novel tactic, the testudo or tortoise formation, where infantrymen formed a tight shield wall, protected from above and below, while archers and cavalry attacked from the flanks. The Byzantines were caught off guard, and their lines shattered beneath the onslaught. As the dust settled, the Byzantine Empire was left reeling from the loss. Emperor Justinian II, facing pressure from his own nobles and sensing the threat posed by the Lombards, realized that a more comprehensive strategy was needed to secure Byzantine interests in Italy. In 572 CE, Justinian II dispatched a new army, led by General Sabinianus, with orders to drive the Lombards back and reclaim key territories. This time, the Byzantines employed a different approach, one that combined brute force with strategic cunning. They targeted the Lombard capital, Pavia, employing siege engines and sapping tactics to breach the city's defenses. The war raged on for decades, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Byzantine Empire suffered repeated setbacks, including the loss of key cities like Ravenna, which fell in 584 CE, and Spoleto, taken by the Lombards in 576 CE. The Lombards, meanwhile, continued their expansion into central Italy, establishing strongholds like Perugia and Arezzo. As the centuries passed, the war took on a life of its own. It became a series of brutal, protracted conflicts, punctuated by periods of relative calm. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars had become an entrenched part of the Italian landscape, a testament to the enduring power struggle between two mighty empires. In the end, it was not until the reign of Emperor Leo III, 717-741 CE, that the Byzantine Empire began to regain its footing in Italy. A series of successful campaigns, including the recapture of Ravenna in 739 CE, marked a turning point in the war. The Lombards were forced to cede ground, and the Byzantines established a foothold on Italian soil. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars came to an end with the death of King Liutprand, 744-751 CE, the last great Lombard king. As the dust settled, it became clear that the war had left deep scars, not just physical ones, but also psychological and cultural. The Italian peninsula would never be the same again, its history forever marked by the clash of these two mighty empires. In this narrative, we see a complex tapestry of events, a dance of power, strategy, and chance that played out over centuries. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars were more than just a series of battles. They were a struggle for dominance, identity, and survival in the face of an uncertain future. As the sun set over the Italian peninsula, a sense of unease settled over the Byzantine-controlled territories. The once peaceful lands were about to be ravaged by war, as the Lombards, a fierce and formidable people, led by the cunning Alboin, prepared to launch an invasion that would shake the very foundations of the empire. In the early 6th century CE, The Byzantines, under the rule of Emperor Justinian I, had been busy reasserting their dominance over the Mediterranean world. Their military campaigns had successfully reconquered parts of Italy, which had been lost to the barbarian hordes during the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The Byzantines had established a strong presence in Italy, with Ravenna serving as their capital and a vital hub for trade and commerce. Meanwhile, across the Alps, the Lombards were growing restless. This warrior culture, originating from present-day Germany and Austria, had been making inroads into the Italian peninsula since the 5th century CE. Their leader, Alboin, was a shrewd tactician with a reputation for cunning and ruthlessness. He saw an opportunity to expand Lombard territory and drive out the Byzantines, who were seen as foreign occupiers. In the spring of 568 CE, Alboin gathered his forces, comprising a mix of seasoned warriors, cavalrymen, and infantry, along with a contingent of Frankish allies. The Lombards had developed a reputation for their lightning-fast raids and devastating battles. Theirs was a warrior culture that prized honor, loyalty, and martial prowess above all else. As the Lombard army approached the Byzantine-controlled territories, the air grew thick with tension. The Byzantines, caught off guard by the sudden invasion, scrambled to muster their own forces. The imperial capital of Ravenna, once a symbol of Byzantine power, now found itself under threat from the very borders it was meant to protect. The Lombards, aware that a swift and decisive strike would be essential in gaining control of the peninsula, launched a series of daring raids deep into Byzantine territory. They targeted strategic strongholds such as the cities of Spoleto, Perugia, and Bari, aiming to break the Byzantine hold on the region. The Byzantines, however, refused to yield without a fight. Emperor Justinian II, determined to defend his empire's Italian territories, rallied his own forces and launched counterattacks against the Lombard invaders. The battles raged across the peninsula, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. As the war dragged on, the Lombards proved themselves to be formidable opponents, adapting their tactics to suit the Byzantine-style warfare they encountered. They developed a system of fortified settlements, or castra, which allowed them to control key territories and disrupt Byzantine supply lines. In the face of this relentless pressure, the Byzantines began to falter. Their forces, stretched thin across the vast Italian terrain, struggled to maintain cohesion in the face of Lombard raids and guerrilla warfare. The once proud capital of Ravenna, now besieged by the Lombards, teetered on the brink of collapse, and yet, despite the odds stacked against them, the Byzantines refused to give up. They fought valiantly, employing their signature tactics of ambushes, traps, and clever use of terrain to harass and demoralize the Lombard invaders. As the years passed, the war continued to rage across Italy, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Lombards, though successful in capturing key strongholds, were unable to vanquish the Byzantine presence entirely. The Byzantines, meanwhile, managed to hold on to their core territories, but at great cost in lives and resources. The war would eventually subside into a low-level conflict, with both sides establishing a fragile equilibrium. But the scars of this protracted struggle would linger, shaping the destiny of Italy and the Mediterranean world for centuries to come. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sun was setting over the Italian peninsula, casting a golden glow over the once mighty city of Rome. It had been centuries since the mighty empire had fallen, and yet the echoes of its grandeur still lingered in the air. But amidst the ruins, a new power was rising, one that would shape the fate of Italy for generations to come. It was the year 568 CE, and the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I stood victorious over the defeated Ostrogoths, their king Theodoric lying lifeless on the battlefield. The Ostrogoths, once a fierce and formidable force, had been vanquished by Justinian's armies, and with them the last remnants of Roman power in Italy were re-established. But as the dust settled, a new challenge emerged, one that would test the mettle of Byzantine rule in Italy. For while Justinian had conquered the Ostrogoths, his successors were not so fortunate. The Lombards, a fierce and restless people from beyond the Alps, began to stir, their eyes fixed on the riches and treasures of the Italian peninsula. First blows fell in 568 CE, when Alboin, the cunning Lombard king, led his armies across the Po River and into Italy. The Byzantines, still reeling from the aftermath of Justinian's wars, were caught off guard, their defenses weak and scattered. The Lombards, with their swift and agile war horses, swept through the countryside like a scythe, leaving destruction in their wake. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian II, desperate to stem the tide, rallied his armies and launched a series of fierce counterattacks. But the Lombards were relentless, their numbers swelling as they drew strength from their victories. City after city fell to their siege engines, Ravenna, Milan, Verona all succumbing to the Lombard onslaught. As the years passed, the Byzantines found themselves increasingly on the back foot, struggling to maintain control over a region that had once been so proudly Roman. The Lombards, meanwhile, continued to push forward, their grip on Italy tightening like a noose. And yet, even as the Lombards claimed victory after victory, there were whispers of discontent among their ranks. For all their bravado and belligerence, the Lombards were a fractious people, prone to infighting and power struggles. The very fabric of their society was woven from threads of violence and competition, a recipe for disaster waiting to be set off. As the Byzantines retreated into their strongholds, they knew that they had to find a way to counter the Lombard threat once and for all. And so, in 680 CE, Emperor Leo III launched a bold initiative, sending his army south to confront the Lombards head-on. The battle raged across the Italian countryside, the outcome hanging precariously in balance. In the end, it was the Byzantines who emerged victorious, their armies securing key victories that would pave the way for centuries of peaceful coexistence with the Lombards. But even as the dust settled, the seeds of conflict had been sown, a legacy of rivalry and enmity that would continue to simmer beneath the surface, waiting to boil over at any moment. So, as we gaze out upon the ruins of ancient Rome, we are reminded of the complex tapestry of history that has woven itself across this storied land. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a chapter in the ongoing saga of Italy's rise and fall, where emperors and kings, armies and factions, all played their part in shaping the destiny of a nation that would never be the same again. The dawn of the 6th century CE saw the Lombards, a formidable Germanic tribe forced to flee their ancestral homeland in search of new pastures. Their exodus was sparked by the rise of the Gepids, a rival tribe that had been growing in power and influence. The Gepids' relentless expansion had pushed the Lombards to the brink, forcing them to abandon their native lands in search of refuge. As they set out on their long journey, the Lombards were met with an unforgiving landscape. The rolling hills, dense forests, and meandering rivers that crisscrossed the European continent seemed to stretch on forever, a daunting obstacle course that tested the tribe's endurance. Yet, driven by their unyielding determination to survive and thrive, they pressed onward, their footsteps echoing across the countryside. Their odyssey took them across the Danube River, where they encountered the Slavs, a newly arrived people who had been expanding their territories in the region. The Lombards formed alliances with these new neighbors, forging bonds that would prove crucial in their future struggles against the Gepids. As they continued their journey, they passed through the lands of the Bulgars, another Germanic tribe that had established themselves in the region. Finally, after many long months of travel, the Lombards reached the northern shores of Italy. The once mighty Roman Empire, now a shadow of its former self, was reeling from the devastating effects of barbarian invasions and internal strife. The Lombards saw an opportunity to establish a new home, free from the threats that had driven them from their native land. In 568 CE, King Alboin, the Lombards' most renowned leader, led his people in a mass migration into Italy. This bold move marked the beginning of a long and tumultuous era as the Lombards sought to carve out a new identity for themselves in this ancient land. Their arrival was met with resistance from the native populations, including the Byzantines, who had established their own presence on Italian soil. As the years passed, the Lombards began to assert their dominance over the region. They settled primarily in the north and central regions of Italy, establishing a capital at Pavia, which would become the seat of their power for centuries to come. The Lombard kingdom flourished under Alboin's leadership, its culture and institutions shaped by the tribe's Germanic heritage. Yet, even as they built a new life in Italy, the Lombards never forgot their roots in the lands beyond the Danube. Their memories of the Gepids who had driven them from their homeland remained bitter, fueling a desire for revenge that would shape the course of their history for generations to come. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, which would rage on and off for nearly 2 centuries, were but one expression of this deep-seated animosity. The conflicts between these two great powers would leave an indelible mark on the Italian peninsula, shaping the destiny of its people and forging a rich tapestry of culture, politics, and warfare that would endure long after the dust had settled. As the sun rose over the Apennine Mountains, the very fate of Italy hung in the balance. It was 551 CE, and the Byzantine Empire, under the capable command of General Belisarius, had set its sights on reclaiming the lost territories from the Ostrogoths. The once mighty kingdom of Theodoric the Great had been reduced to a mere shadow of its former self, and the Byzantines saw an opportunity to reassert their dominance over the Italian peninsula. Belisarius, a veteran of numerous campaigns against the Persians and Vandals, led his forces with a strategic brilliance that would leave his enemies in awe. As he marched across the rolling hills and verdant plains of Italy, his soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine, their shields emblazoned with the symbol of the Byzantine Empire. The double-headed eagle, the Ostrogoths, under the leadership of King Totila, were formidable foes indeed, but they were no match for the disciplined ranks of the Byzantine army. One by one, the key strongholds fell to Belisarius's troops. Ravenna, the capital city of the Ostrogothic kingdom, Milan, a vital hub of trade and commerce, and even the fabled city of Rome itself. As the Byzantines claimed victory after victory, the Ostrogoths began to falter. Their once mighty kingdom was reduced to a mere fraction of its former size, and Totila's power was waning fast. It seemed that the tide of history had turned in favor of the Byzantines, and Italy would soon be back under their control. But fate has a way of being cruel, and the Lombards were about to prove themselves as formidable an opponent as any the Byzantines had faced before. Hailing from the distant lands of Pannonia, modern-day Hungary, this fierce and ruthless people had been slowly making inroads into Italy for years. Led by their cunning king, Alboin, the Lombards saw the weakened Ostrogothic kingdom as the perfect opportunity to strike a blow against their Byzantine rivals. With their battle-hardened warriors and superior cavalry, they swept across the Italian countryside like a force of nature, leaving destruction and chaos in their wake. As the Byzantines struggled to contain this new threat, Belisarius's triumphant campaign began to unravel. One by one, his hard-won victories were lost as the Lombards retook key cities and strongholds. The once mighty Roman Empire, it seemed, was about to be eclipsed by a new power on the continent. And so, as the curtain closed on the 6th century CE, Italy found itself plunged into chaos and uncertainty. The Byzantines, who had once again reconquered much of the peninsula, were forced to regroup and reassess their strategy in the face of this new and formidable foe. The Lombards, meanwhile, had established themselves as a force to be reckoned with, their grip on Italy tightening like a noose around the neck of its people. The stage was set for centuries of conflict and bloodshed as these two mighty empires clashed in a struggle that would shape the very fabric of Italian history. The war between the Byzantines and Lombards had begun, and only time would tell which side would emerge victorious in this epic struggle for dominance. As the sun rose over the Mediterranean, casting a golden glow over the ravaged landscape of Italy, the Byzantine Empire prepared to launch yet another campaign to reclaim its lost territories from the Lombards. The year was 600 CE, and the war between the two powers had been raging for over 3 decades. The Byzantines, led by Emperor Maurice, had been plagued by a series of defeats at the hands of the Lombards, whose armies were notorious for their discipline, ferocity, and sheer numbers. Despite these setbacks, the Byzantine emperor remained resolute in his determination to reconquer Italy, convinced that the Lombard kingdom was a mere aberration that could be eliminated with sufficient force. Assembling a formidable army from the ranks of the imperial guard, the Byzantines set out to crush the Lombards once and for all. The campaign began auspiciously enough, with the Byzantine forces capturing the strategic city of Perugia, which had long been a thorn in their side. But the Lombard king, Alboin, was no pushover, and he responded swiftly to the Byzantine incursion. Alboin marshaled his armies, comprising of fierce warriors, clad in gleaming steel armor, and set out to meet the invaders. The two forces clashed on the sun-baked plains outside Perugia, the sound of clashing steel and screaming men echoing across the landscape as the battle raged on for hours. Despite being outnumbered, the Byzantines fought valiantly, their soldiers armed with bows, spears, and shields emblazoned with the image of the emperor. However, the Lombards' superior discipline and training ultimately told, and they drove the Byzantine forces back in disarray. The defeat was a bitter pill for Emperor Maurice to swallow, but he refused to give up on his goal of reconquering Italy. He regrouped his armies and launched another campaign, this time targeting the Lombard stronghold of Milan. The battle that ensued was fierce and bloody, with both sides suffering heavy casualties as they clashed in the streets and alleys of the city. In the end, it was the Lombards who emerged victorious once more, their king Alboin personally leading the charge against the Byzantine forces. As the dust settled on the battlefield, the Byzantines were forced to retreat, their tails between their legs. The failure of this campaign marked the beginning of a long and bloody stalemate, as both sides continued to clash in a series of brutal battles that left Italy scarred and ravaged. The war would rage on for decades, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage over the other. Despite these repeated setbacks, the Byzantine Empire refused to abandon its goal of reconquering Italy. Emperor Maurice's successors, including Heraclius and Constans II, would continue to launch campaigns against the Lombards, only to be met with defeat after defeat. The war would eventually subside, but not before leaving deep scars on both the Byzantine and Lombard societies. As the centuries passed, the memory of this conflict would fade into history, but its impact on the development of Italy and the Byzantine Empire would remain a lasting testament to the enduring power of war. As the Lombard kingdom solidified its grip on Italy, a new era dawned in the region. In 568 CE, the once mighty Byzantine Empire had faltered, and the Lombards seized the opportunity to establish their own capital. They set their sights on Pavia, a strategic location nestled between the Ticino River and the Apennine Mountains. This ancient city would become the beating heart of medieval Italy, pulsating with power, culture, and creativity. Pavia's transformation into the Lombard capital was a gradual process, marked by a series of calculated moves. The Lombards' king, Alboin, had already demonstrated his cunning and military prowess in conquering much of Italy. Now, he set his sights on solidifying his kingdom's position by establishing a permanent seat of power. As Pavia began to take shape as the new capital, it became a magnet for artisans, merchants, and scholars from across the region. The city's fertile plains and nearby forests made it an ideal location for agriculture, providing a reliable food supply for its growing population. The Ticino River, which bisected the city, offered a natural defense barrier and a conduit for trade. As Pavia flourished, it became a hub of cultural activity, attracting scholars and poets from as far afield as Greece and Rome. The Lombard court patronized the arts, commissioning magnificent works of art and architecture that reflected their new status as rulers of Italy. The city's cathedral, the Basilica di San Pietro, rose like a beacon, its soaring arches and glittering mosaics a testament to the Lombards' cultural ambitions. The palace complex at Pavia became a symbol of the Lombard kingdom's power and prestige. Its imposing walls, adorned with intricate carvings and frescoes, housed the king's court and served as the seat of government. The palace's grand halls echoed with the sound of laughter and music, as lavish feasts and celebrations were held in honor of the monarchs. Pavia's strategic location also made it a crucial hub for trade and commerce. Merchants from across Europe flocked to the city, drawn by its bustling markets and reputation for fair dealing. The Lombards' control of the Mediterranean sea trade routes ensured that Pavia remained a vital link between East and West, with goods flowing in and out of the city like the Ticino River. As the years passed, Pavia's status as the Lombard kingdom's capital only grew stronger. It became a byword for power, culture, and learning, attracting scholars from as far away as Baghdad and Constantinople. City scholars made groundbreaking discoveries in fields such as medicine, mathematics, and astronomy, laying the foundations for future generations of Italian intellectuals. In the midst of this cultural renaissance, Pavia's architecture reflected the Lombards' love of grandeur and opulence. The city's churches, palaces, and monasteries rose like sentinels, their imposing structures a testament to the kingdom's wealth and prestiges. Famous Piazza dei Miracoli, with its gleaming white marble and ornate fountains, became a symbol of Pavia's status as a city of wonder. Pavia's golden age was not without its challenges, however. The Lombards faced repeated incursions from the Franks to the north and the Byzantines to the east, testing their mettle and requiring them to adapt their military strategies. Despite these external pressures, the Lombard kingdom remained steadfast, its capital at Pavia remaining a beacon of power and culture in medieval Italy. In 751 CE, with the Lombards' kingdom at its peak, Pavia stood as a shining exemplar of the fusion of politics, culture, and learning. Its grand architecture, bustling markets, and vibrant cultural scene made it a true center of gravity in the medieval world. As the city's scholars pored over ancient texts and crafted new works of art, they knew that their beloved Pavia was a place where history and creativity merged to forge a brighter future for all Italy. As the Byzantine-Lombard Wars raged on, a cultural revolution was brewing in the Lombard kingdom. The fusion of Byzantine and Germanic influences gave rise to a unique style of architecture, art, and literature that would leave an indelible mark on European culture. In the heart of Pavia, the capital city of the Lombards, a majestic cathedral rose from the ashes of war-torn buildings. Construction of San Michele Maggiore, completed in 690 CE, marked a turning point in Lombard architecture. Byzantine artisans, brought to Italy by the victorious Lombards, infused their expertise with Germanic simplicity and elegance. The result was a structure that blended the ornate mosaics and domes of Constantinople with the sturdy stone foundations and Roman-inspired arches of Germany. As visitors entered the cathedral, they were struck by the kaleidoscope of colors dancing across the walls and ceiling. Mosaics depicting biblical scenes, created by Byzantine masters, shimmered like jewels in the soft light of day. The intricate designs seemed to come alive, as if infused with a life force that transcended time and space. The Lombards' artistic flair extended beyond architecture. Their craftsmen excelled at creating exquisite metalwork, adorned with intricate patterns and figurines that told stories of mythological creatures and everyday life. Golden brooches, silver cups, and ornate jewelry testified to the Lombards' love of adornment and their skill in working precious metals. In the realm of literature, the Lombards forged a distinct identity by adopting and adapting Byzantine epics and poems. The Aeneid, Homer's classic work, was translated into Latin by the Lombard poet Virgil. This masterpiece of Roman poetry influenced generations of Italian writers, including Dante Alighieri, who would later draw inspiration from it. The fusion of cultures also manifested in music and dance. Byzantine melodies mingled with Germanic rhythms to create a unique sound that echoed through the cities and countryside. The Lombards' love of song and storytelling gave rise to a rich oral tradition passed down through generations by traveling bards and troubadours. As the centuries unfolded, the Lombard legacy in architecture, art, and literature continued to evolve. Monasteries and churches sprouted across the kingdom, each one a testament to the enduring power of Byzantine and Germanic influences. The artistic and cultural heritage of the Lombards would shape the course of Italian history, leaving an indelible mark on the Renaissance that was yet to come. In the twilight of the Byzantine-Lombard Wars, as the sun dipped below the Apennine Mountains, the Lombards' creative spirit stood tall, a beacon of cultural fusion and artistic innovation. The kingdom's artists, artisans, and writers had forged a new identity, one that blended the ornate elegance of Constantinople with the sturdy strength of Germanic tradition. This rich tapestry of culture would forever be woven into the fabric of Italian history, awaiting future generations to unravel its secrets and marvel at the Lombards' enduring legacy. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a legacy of conquest and change as the sun set over the rolling hills of Italy, the once mighty empire of the Byzantines was beset on all sides by the determined Lombards. The very fabric of their power, woven so carefully across the centuries, began to fray as the relentless pressure of war took its toll. The wars that ravaged Italy from 568 to 751 CE were a testament to the unyielding spirit of both the Byzantine and Lombard nations. Though the outcome would ultimately favor the Lombards, the consequences for both sides were profound, shaping the course of history for centuries to come. As the Byzantines, masters of the Mediterranean, looked out upon their Italian territories, they saw a landscape transformed by war. The once proud cities of Ravenna and Rome, symbols of imperial power, now lay in ruins, their grandeur reduced to rubble and dust. The once mighty legions that had marched across Europe, spreading Byzantine influence far and wide, were now stretched thin, fighting for every inch of ground against the relentless Lombard hordes. Meanwhile, the Lombards, those fierce and cunning warriors from beyond the Alps, watched with growing confidence as their power grew with each passing year. Like a river swollen by spring rains, their armies surged forward, claiming new territories and cities, their banners emblazoned with the red dragon of their emblematic standard. As the wars raged on, the Byzantines found themselves gradually losing control over much of Italy. The once familiar landscape of the peninsula was now a patchwork quilt of conquered territories as the Lombards carved out their own domains. The city of Pavia, with its ancient walls and strategic location at the confluence of the Ticino River, became the seat of Lombard power, a beacon shining brightly across Western Europe. The consequences of these wars were far-reaching, reverberating through the centuries like the echoes of a mighty drumbeat. For the Byzantines, the loss of Italy marked the beginning of a long decline in their fortunes, as the once mighty empire struggled to maintain its influence on the continent. The Lombards, meanwhile, emerged from the wars as a major power in Western Europe, their name becoming synonymous with strength and martial prowess. As the dust settled on this epic conflict, the people of Italy looked out upon a new landscape, one shaped by the triumphs and tragedies of war. Though the Byzantines would continue to hold sway over Greece and the eastern Mediterranean, their influence in Italy had waned, as the Lombards claimed their rightful place among the great powers of Europe. In this new era, the red dragon standard of the Lombards flapped proudly across the Italian skies, a symbol of a nation reborn from the ashes of war. Saved, landing, and were released. There, as the sun rose over the Apennine Mountains, casting its golden light upon the newly conquered territories. The Lombards looked out upon their dominion, knowing that they had forged a legacy that would shape the course of European history for generations to come. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a tipping point in European history in the twilight years of the ancient Roman Empire, a series of devastating conflicts would shatter the unity of the empire and set in motion the trajectory that would ultimately lead to the fragmentation of Rome into Eastern Byzantine and Western halves. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, waged from 568 to 751 CE, were a pivotal moment in European history, marking the beginning of the Middle Ages and forever altering the destiny of the continent. The wars themselves were a brutal and relentless struggle for dominance between two powerful forces: the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, and the Kingdom of the Lombards. The Lombards, a Germanic tribe that had long been restless under Roman rule, saw an opportunity to strike at the heart of their oppressors when the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CC. As the Byzantines struggled to maintain control over their territories in Italy and Illyria, the Lombards launched a series of lightning-fast raids that targeted the imperial capital. Ravenna, the city once the seat of Roman power, now lay in ruins, its defenses breached by the relentless Lombard armies. Emperor Justinian I, who had already faced numerous challenges in his bid to reassert Byzantine dominance over the western provinces, was forced to divert precious resources to defend against these new threats. Meanwhile, the Lombards, fueled by their success and boldened by the chaos that surrounded them, continued to push deeper into Byzantine territory. They conquered the entire Italian peninsula, leaving only a few scattered Byzantine strongholds in their wake. The once mighty Byzantine Empire, which had long been the dominant power in Europe, was now forced to confront its own vulnerabilities. As the war dragged on, the very fabric of European society began to unravel. Trade routes were disrupted, cities were sacked, and populations were displaced or slaughtered. The once stable borders between East and West began to blur as rival factions vied for control of the fragmented territories. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars had unleashed a maelstrom of chaos that would take centuries to settle. In the midst of this turmoil, the stage was set for the emergence of new powers in Europe. The Carolingian dynasty, which would eventually give rise to Charlemagne and his vast empire, began to take shape in the western provinces. In the east, the Byzantine Empire, though battered and bruised, continued to hold its own against the Lombards, ultimately emerging as a resilient and enduring force that would persist for centuries. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars thus marked a turning point in European history. The once unified Roman Empire had been rent asunder, leaving behind two separate entities that would forever alter the destiny of Europe. As the dust settled on this conflict, the continent entered a new era, one characterized by fragmentation, instability, and the emergence of new powers that would shape its future. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars left an indelible mark on European history, a testament to the enduring power of conflict to shape the course of human events. From this moment forward, Europe would be forever divided into Eastern and Western halves, each with its own distinct culture, politics, and destiny. The Middle Ages had begun, and the world was forever changed. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a century of turmoil and triumph, 568-751 CE, as the sun rose over the rolling hills of Italy, a sense of unease settled over the once mighty Roman Empire. The year was 568 CE, and the Lombards, a fierce and warlike tribe from beyond the Danube, were poised to strike at the very heart of the Byzantine Empire. In the eastern reaches of the empire, Emperor Justinian's grand vision for a unified Christendom was being tested by the relentless pressure of barbarian invasions. The Huns had already ravaged the Western Roman Empire, leaving behind a power vacuum that the Lombards were eager to exploit. Led by their cunning king, Alboin, they would prove to be formidable foes, determined to carve out a kingdom for themselves in the rich lands of Italy. As the Lombard army advanced into the Po Valley, they encountered little resistance from the Byzantine forces, which were still reeling from the devastating effects of the plague. The once mighty walls of Ravenna, the capital city of the Western Roman Empire, now stood as a hollow monument to a bygone era. The war began with a series of swift and decisive victories for the Lombards. They seized key cities like Ticinum, modern Pavia, and Mediolanum, modern Milan, which became their capitals. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian II was forced to flee Rome itself, leaving behind a power vacuum that would be exploited by other rival factions. But the Byzantines refused to go quietly into the night. Led by the brilliant general Narses, they began to regroup and counterattack. In 572 CE, Narses launched a daring assault on the Lombard capital of Pavia. only to be repelled by Alboin's cunning tactics. As the war raged on, the Lombards continued to expand their kingdom, absorbing smaller tribes like the Gepids and the Heruli. They also formed alliances with other barbarian groups, including the Avars, who would prove to be a thorn in the side of the Byzantines for centuries to come. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire was struggling to maintain its cohesion. Emperor Justin II's successor, Tiberius II, faced down rebellions and attempted coups, while the plague continued to decimate cities like Constantinople. Despite these challenges, the Byzantines managed to regroup and launch a series of counterattacks against the Lombards. In 590 CE, they even scored a decisive victory at the Battle of Taginae, which sent shockwaves throughout the Lombard kingdom. But the war would not be resolved so easily. Over the next several decades, the Lombards continued to push back against Byzantine advances, while also facing challenges from within their own ranks. Power struggles and assassinations rocked the throne as various factions vied for control. In 751 CE, the Lombard kingdom reached its zenith under the rule of King Aistulf, but his reign would be short-lived as he was overthrown by a coup led by the Frankish king Desiderius. The once mighty Lombard kingdom would eventually fall to the Franks, marking the end of an era in which the Byzantine-Lombard Wars had been fought. As the dust settled on this century-long conflict, the Byzantine Empire emerged victorious but weakened. Lombards, meanwhile, had carved out a proud kingdom that would endure for centuries to come. Despite the turmoil and strife, both empires had managed to leave their mark on the world, forging legacies that would be remembered long after the wars themselves were forgotten. The Byzantine-Lombard Wars, a century of conflict and conquest, 568-751 CE, in the misty dawn of a new era, the echoes of ancient empires still lingered in the air. The once mighty Roman Empire had crumbled, leaving behind two rival powers, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, and the Kingdom of the Lombards. This tumultuous period, spanning from 568 to 751 CE, would witness a century-long struggle for dominance, marked by brutal battles, cunning diplomacy, and the rise of new powers. As the sun rose over the Apennine Mountains, the Lombards, led by King Alboin, began their campaign to conquer Italy. With their fierce warrior culture and battle-hardened cavalry, they swept across the peninsula, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The Byzantine Empire, under Emperor Justinian I, responded with a series of military campaigns aimed at repelling the Lombard invasion. The early years of the war saw the Byzantines suffer a string of defeats as the Lombards exploited their initial momentum to claim key cities and territories. The once thriving city of Ravenna, capital of the Western Roman Empire, fell to the Lombards in 552 CE. As the Byzantine Empire reeled from these setbacks, the Lombards continued their westward push, claiming Milan and Pavia, the latter becoming their capital. However, as the war raged on, the Byzantines began to regroup and counterattack. Led by generals Narses and Munzus, they launched a series of successful campaigns against the Lombards, pushing them back into their original territories in the north. The Battle of Ad Decimum, fought in 552 CE, marked a turning point in the war as the Byzantines inflicted heavy losses on the Lombard army. The conflict also saw the rise of other powers eager to capitalize on the chaos. The kingdom of the Franks under their legendary king, Clovis I, began to expand its territories, establishing alliances with both the Byzantine and Lombard courtscourt. Meanwhile, the Avars, a powerful nomadic people from Central Asia, launched raids into Europe, striking fear into the hearts of both the Byzantines and Lombards. As the war dragged on, diplomacy played an increasing role in shaping the conflict. The Byzantine Emperor Tiberius II attempted to negotiate with King Agilulf of the Lombards, hoping to create a lasting peace. However, these efforts were ultimately doomed to fail, as both sides remained committed to their territorial claims. The final years of the war saw the emergence of a new threat: the Bulgars, a Slavic people who had begun to organize themselves into a powerful state. The Byzantine Empire, sensing an opportunity to weaken its Lombard foes, formed alliances with the Bulgars and launched joint campaigns against the Lombards. In 751 CE, the Byzantines scored a decisive victory at the Battle of Trento, forcing the Lombards to sue for peace. The war had lasted for nearly 2 centuries, leaving behind a legacy of destruction, displacement, and cultural exchange. As the dust settled, the Byzantine Empire emerged as the dominant power in Italy, while the Lombards regrouped and reorganized their territories. This tumultuous century of conflict and conquest had forged a new Europe, one shaped by the rivalries and alliances of the Byzantines and Lombards. As the sun set on this era, the echoes of war faded into the distance, replaced by the whispers of a new era, marked by the rise of Carolingian Empire and the dawn of the Middle Ages.